Cristiano Ronaldo is the most famous athlete on the planet. 5 Ballon d'Or awards, 8 league titles across 4 different countries, over 900 career goals, the most followed human being on Instagram, a billion-dollar personal brand built from the ground up by a kid who grew up in a tiny apartment on a tiny island with almost nothing to his name. You think you know this man. You've watched the goals, you've seen the celebrations, you've heard the headlines. But trust me, the real story of Cristiano Ronaldo is wilder, darker, more dramatic, and more inspiring than anything the highlight reels have ever shown you. Here are 20 facts about Cristiano Ronaldo that are going to absolutely floor you. Some of these will make you root for him harder than you ever have. Some of them will genuinely shock you. And at least one of them might actually change the way you see him forever. Let's start with the fact that Cristiano Ronaldo almost never became Cristiano Ronaldo. Not because of a failed trial, not because a scout didn't rate him, but because his own heart nearly ended his life before his career even began. When Ronaldo was 15 years old and had just joined the Sporting CP Academy in Lisbon, having already left his family in Madeira at the age of 12, which we'll get to, doctors discovered that he had a condition called tachycardia. His heart was racing at an abnormal rate, not slightly elevated, racing at a level that put him at serious risk of cardiac arrest. Not someday, not eventually, now. The standard treatment for this condition is surgery. And when you're a 15-year-old kid who has already sacrificed everything to chase a football dream, being told you need heart surgery is the kind of news that ends most stories before they start. Other kids in that situation would have been advised to stop playing. Their parents might have pulled them out of the academy. The risk would have seemed too great. But Ronaldo, even at 15, was not most kids. He underwent a laser procedure to correct the irregular heartbeat. And within days of that surgery, not weeks, not months, days, he was back on the training pitch. The medical staff were reportedly stunned. His recovery speed and his sheer determination to return to football before he'd been given clearance to do so were both extraordinary and slightly terrifying. But that's the thing about Ronaldo that most people miss when they focus on his talent. The talent is real. But what's really driven everything is an almost supernatural refusal to accept any version of events where he doesn't win. Think about what that moment did to him psychologically. At 15, having already left his mother, his siblings, and his home, having already lived through the poverty and the uncertainty and the loneliness of being a child athlete far from everyone he loved, he was told his heart was broken. And he fixed it in days and got back out there. Every time you see him crumble under pressure now, which is basically never, remember that 15-year-old on the operating table deciding his story wasn't over yet. Fact 2. His father died without ever seeing him reach the top. Of all the chapters in Ronaldo's life, this is the one that cuts the deepest. His father, José Dinis Aveiro, struggled with severe alcoholism for most of his adult life. It's a disease that tore through the Aveiro family, creating financial instability, emotional chaos, and a childhood for Ronaldo that was far harder than most people realize. Football wasn't just Ronaldo's dream. For a kid growing up in those circumstances, football was a way out, a way to transform not just his own life but his family's. José Dinis died in September 2005. Ronaldo was 20 years old, already at Manchester United, already beginning to show the world what he was capable of. But his father died before the Champions League titles, before the Ballon d'Or, before Real Madrid, before any of the moments that would define his legacy as the greatest or one of the 2 greatest footballers who ever lived. His father never got to see the full picture. What makes this even more painful is what Ronaldo has said about it in the rare moments he's opened up. He's described his father as someone who loved him deeply despite his struggles. Someone who, when sober, was warm and present and proud. The disease took a lot from that relationship, but it didn't take everything. And Ronaldo has consistently spoken about his father with a complexity and a tenderness that speaks to just how much unresolved love and grief he still carries. Ronaldo's public dedication of his 2008 Ballon d'Or to his father was one of the most genuinely emotional moments in the history of football awards. A 23-year-old man holding the most prestigious individual prize in the sport and telling the world he wished his dad could have been there. There wasn't a PR team behind that moment. That was just a son who missed his father. In subsequent years, Ronaldo has funded addiction recovery programs and spoken openly about mental health in a way that directly connects to his father's illness. The most followed person on social media using his platform to destigmatize addiction is not a coincidence. It's a son honoring a father the only way he still can. Fact 3. He left his family at age 12 and cried every night for months. Here's something that the trophy count and the Bugattis and the Instagram followers tend to bury. Cristiano Ronaldo left his mother, his sisters, his brother, and everything he had ever known at the age of 12. 12 years old. To move to Lisbon, hundreds of miles from home, to join the Sporting CP Academy. And for the first several months, by his own admission, he cried himself to sleep nearly every night. The homesickness was overwhelming. He was a child from a small, tight-knit community on an island where everybody knew everybody, suddenly placed in a competitive, ruthless football environment in a city that felt nothing like home. He had an accent that made other kids mock him. He had an intensity and a seriousness about football that set him apart from his peers in ways that weren't always comfortable. And he had no family nearby to absorb any of it. What this period did to Ronaldo's psychology is something analysts, journalists, and people who know him well have discussed for years. The consensus is that those early years of isolation and emotional hardship created in him a hunger that is genuinely unique. When you have nothing, when you're far from home, surrounded by doubt, armed only with talent and willpower, you learn to use those tools with a focus and an intensity that kids with comfortable, supported childhoods often never develop. The loneliness became fuel. The homesickness became motivation. Every night he cried. He also got up the next morning and trained harder than everyone else. Because going home meant giving up. And giving up was never going to be an option. It also explains, in a very direct way, why Ronaldo's family is so central to his life now. The mother who he was separated from at 12 is one of the most prominent figures in his life as an adult. His children are with him everywhere. His sister Katia has worked in the music industry with his support. His brother Hugo has been through rehabilitation programs that Ronaldo funded. The man who was separated from his family as a child has built his entire adult life around keeping his family as close as possible. That's not a PR decision. That's psychology. That's a child who lost something enormous learning to make absolutely certain he never loses it again. Fact 4. He holds his son's mother's identity secret and has for over a decade. In June 2010, Cristiano Ronaldo announced on his official Facebook page that he had become a father. His son, Cristiano Ronaldo Jr., known as Cristianini, had been born via surrogacy. And in that same announcement, Ronaldo made one of the most extraordinary pledges in modern celebrity life. The identity of the biological mother would remain private. At his request. Forever, more than 15 years later, he has kept that promise. In an era when literally nothing about any public figure's life stays private for more than 5 minutes, in an era of hacking and tabloid checkbooks and social media and anonymous sources willing to sell any story for any price, Ronaldo has maintained this secret with an iron discipline that has baffled journalists, frustrated tabloids, and genuinely impressed almost everyone who understands how difficult it is to keep something like this locked down at his level of fame. He has never named her. He has never confirmed any of the names that tabloids have proposed over the years. He has never commented on the matter beyond his original statement. And most remarkably, neither has she. Whoever this woman is, she has kept the agreement. In a world where the agreement is almost always eventually broken, this one has held. What does this tell us about Ronaldo? Several things. First, that when he gives his word on something personal, on something that matters to him at a level that goes beyond image management, he keeps it with a completeness that is rare. Second, that his protective instincts toward his children are genuine and fierce. He decided very early that Cristiano Jr. deserved a life where the circumstances of his birth were not tabloid fodder, and has defended that decision for 15 years. Third, and this is perhaps the most interesting part, this is a man who lives almost entirely in public, who shares enormous amounts of his personal life, and yet has drawn this one absolute line. This one thing is private, and it always will be. Fact 5. His body fat percentage is scientifically extraordinary for his age. Let's talk about the body, because you cannot talk about Cristiano Ronaldo without addressing what he has done to his physical form, and what that physical form continues to achieve at an age when virtually every other player of his era has long since retired. Ronaldo's body fat percentage has been measured on multiple occasions throughout his career at figures between 7 and 10%. For context, the average healthy adult male sits somewhere between 18 and 24% body fat. Elite professional footballers typically operate between 10 and 14%. 7 to 10% is the kind of number you see in elite sprinters and competitive bodybuilders, people who have organized their entire lives around achieving and maintaining that figure. And here's what makes this truly remarkable. Ronaldo has been operating at or near these figures for his entire career. Not just in his peak years at 25. Not just during the Real Madrid Galactico era. Now, in his late 30s, when the sport's greatest players typically begin their physical decline, when reaction times slow and muscle fibers change and recovery windows lengthen, Ronaldo has maintained a physical standard that defies the normal rules of athletic aging. How? The stories that have come out of every club he's ever played for are consistent and extraordinary. He sleeps in 5 separate 90-minute sleep cycles rather than one long sleep, based on the advice of sleep specialist Nick Littlehales. His diet is almost fanatically precise: grilled chicken, salads, egg whites, avocado, and fresh fruit, with virtually no processed food and minimal alcohol. He reportedly uses a cryotherapy chamber for recovery. He trains beyond the mandatory team sessions, staying after training finishes to work specifically on aspects of his game he wants to improve. He is believed to perform around 1,000 sit-ups a day. 1,000 a day. The discipline required to live this way is a philosophical statement. Ronaldo's body is his proof that will beat circumstance. That the talent he was born with is only the beginning of what effort and obsession can create. And every year he plays at the top level past the point where everyone said he would decline is another year that argument wins. Fact 6. He was convicted of tax fraud and fined millions. In July 2017, Cristiano Ronaldo was formally accused by Spanish prosecutors of defrauding the tax authorities of approximately 14.7 million euros between 2011 and 2014. The charge was that he had used a shell company structure to conceal income from image rights, deliberately routing money through offshore entities to avoid Spanish tax obligations. In January 2019, Ronaldo accepted a deal, a fine of around 18.8 million euros and a suspended 2-year prison sentence, and entered a plea arrangement that saw him avoid any custodial sentence. He appeared in court, accepted the terms, and the matter was resolved without him spending a single day behind bars. Now, this is not a unique story in Spanish football. During the same period, Lionel Messi faced similar charges. So did Jose Mourinho. So did multiple other high-profile players and managers. Spanish prosecutors ran what amounted to a systematic campaign against the financial arrangements used by foreign players to manage image rights income. The legal landscape around these arrangements was genuinely complex and contested, and many tax lawyers argued at the time that the shell company structures operated in a legal gray area rather than constituting outright fraud. None of that changes the fact that Ronaldo was convicted. He accepted the conviction and paid the fine. And the impact on his public image, while significant in the short term, was ultimately absorbed within the larger narrative of his career. In Spain, where the systematic nature of the prosecutions was widely discussed, the public response was more nuanced than the tabloid headlines suggested. And within a year, Ronaldo had moved to Juventus and begun an entirely new chapter. The man's ability to reset narrative through performance on the pitch is, frankly, one of the most remarkable things about him. Fact 7. Ronaldinho chose Ronaldo over himself. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, the greatest footballer on the planet was Ronaldinho. Not arguably, not in some people's opinion. Objectively, the Brazilian was a force of nature whose combination of technical brilliance, creativity, joy, and winning impact had never been seen before. When he arrived at Barcelona, he didn't just transform a football club. He transformed the way people thought about what football could look like. He won the Ballon d'Or. He packed stadiums around the world. He made defenders look like they'd forgotten how to walk. He was the greatest. And then he met a 17-year-old kid from Madeira, and everything changed. By all accounts, Ronaldinho recognized something in Ronaldo that went beyond normal talent recognition. He saw a kid who was going to be better than him. Not as creative, perhaps. Not with the same irrepressible joy, but better in the complete, total, winning sense of the word. And rather than viewing that as a threat, rather than doing what lesser men would do and distancing himself from a competition, Ronaldinho committed to nurturing it. He took Ronaldo under his wing. He vouched for him to other players. He helped him understand the demands of playing at the highest level. He even famously told Kobe Bryant, one of the most competitive human beings who ever lived, that this kid Ronaldo was going to be the greatest player of all time. Kobe laughed. Ronaldinho was deadly serious. Ronaldinho's own career began its decline around the same period that Ronaldo's rose to its peak. Some who knew both men during that transition period have described it as if Ronaldinho made a conscious choice to pass the torch rather than fight for it. Whether that's romanticism or reality, the outcome is undeniable. Ronaldo took the torch and ran with it for 2 decades. And in doing so, he carried Ronaldinho's legacy alongside his own. Fact 8. He set a world record with his social media following and monetizes it like no one else. Let's talk about a number that has no precedent in human history. At his peak, Cristiano Ronaldo has had over 600 million followers across his social media platforms, with his Instagram alone surpassing 600 million followers, making him the most followed person on the platform and one of the most followed accounts of any kind that has ever existed on the internet. For context, the population of the entire European Union is around 450 million people. The combined population of the United States and Canada is around 370 million. Ronaldo's Instagram following is larger than either of those. He has built, in the digital space, an audience that dwarfs most countries. And he monetizes it with an efficiency that has changed the way brands think about athlete partnerships. A single Instagram post from Ronaldo's account carries an estimated commercial value of between $1 and $2 million. He has been ranked by multiple business publications as the highest-earning person per Instagram post in the world, above musicians, above actors, above other athletes, above everyone. The figure placed on his account as a whole runs into the hundreds of millions of dollars as a standalone asset. What's interesting about how Ronaldo uses his social media is that it's not just transactional. He mixes family content, his children, Georgina, holiday moments, with football content, fitness content, and branded content in a ratio that feels personal rather than corporate. The audience trusts him because he gives them enough real life to believe the commercial content is coming from a genuine human being rather than a marketing department. That calibration is incredibly difficult to achieve and almost impossible to fake. Ronaldo and his team have managed it for over a decade, and the commercial returns are simply without parallel in the history of sports marketing. Fact 9. He once donated his entire World Cup bonus to an orphanage. The charity stories about Ronaldo are numerous, and some are well known. The brain surgery, the Ballon d'Or auctions, the blood donations. But there's one that quietly stands above the rest in terms of what it says about his character. Following the 2010 World Cup in South Africa, Ronaldo, who had endured a frustrating tournament, nonetheless donated his entire Portugal World Cup bonus to an orphanage in his hometown of Funchal, Madeira. Not publicly, not with a press release, not with an Instagram post. He just did it. The story only emerged later through the orphanage itself. This is the charitable Ronaldo that doesn't get nearly enough coverage because it's the version that doesn't generate content. When Ronaldo gives publicly and dramatically, the Ballon d'Or auctions, the announcements, the moments captured on camera, that's the Ronaldo the media covers. But the Ronaldo who quietly routes money to Madeira, who funds recovery programs for his brother Hugo, who has reportedly never worn a sponsor's name in the number 10 position because he's dedicated that space to his children's names, that Ronaldo operates largely out of public sight. The orphanage story matters because of where it comes from. Ronaldo grew up in poverty, real poverty. His family shared a single room. His mother worked as a cook and cleaner. The concept of not having enough, of needing help from outside your family to survive, this is not abstract for him. It's lived experience. And when he gives to an orphanage in Funchal, he's giving back to the specific community that shaped the specific person he became. That's not charity as PR. That's something much more personal and much more profound. Fact 10. Sir Alex Ferguson saw something in him no other manager did. In the summer of 2003, a 16-year-old Cristiano Ronaldo turned up for his first pre-season training session at Manchester United. He was technically Sporting CP's best young player. He'd just torn United's first team apart in a pre-season friendly that left experienced international defenders looking bewildered, and United had paid £12 million to bring him to England. He was, by any measure, one of the most coveted teenage footballers in Europe. And he was terrified. Genuinely, visibly terrified. He barely spoke. He was mocked, gently but persistently, for his elaborate tricks in training. English football at that time had a culture of ruthless senior players cutting down junior showboats, and Ronaldo's step-overs and theatrical freestyle moments made him an immediate target. Ferguson could have protected him. Instead, he watched, and what he saw convinced him he had something completely special on his hands. Because rather than withdrawing, rather than simplifying his game to avoid ridicule, Ronaldo doubled down. He worked harder in training after the mockery than before it. He stayed later. He perfected every trick until it was genuinely undefendable in competitive situations. And when the season started and those same senior players found themselves unable to get anywhere near him in actual matches, the dynamic shifted permanently. Ferguson later said that in 40 years of managing football players, he had never encountered a player with a more fierce and productive response to criticism than Ronaldo. That wasn't a compliment about talent. That was a compliment about character. And it came from the greatest manager the sport has ever produced. But the Ferguson-Ronaldo relationship wasn't always perfect. When Ronaldo first expressed a desire to leave for Real Madrid in 2008, Ferguson was furious. There was a very public standoff. The relationship went through genuine turbulence. And yet, when the time finally came and the move happened, Ferguson not only sanctioned it but openly said it was the right decision for Ronaldo's development. That kind of managerial generosity, letting your best player go because it's right for him, is as rare as the player himself. Fact 11. He has never tasted alcohol in his life. In a sport defined by dressing room culture, post-match celebrations, sponsor events, and the social drinking that permeates professional football at every level, Cristiano Ronaldo has never consumed a single alcoholic drink in his life. Not at a World Cup celebration. Not at a Champions League final. Not at a birthday party. Not once. The reason is both simple and heartbreaking. He watched his father's alcoholism destroy his family from the inside. He watched what the disease did to Jose Dinas Aveiro, the physical deterioration, the financial chaos, the emotional distance it created between father and son. And he made a decision as a child that he would never allow that substance into his body. This is not a health hack. This is not an athletic performance decision, though it obviously helps with both. This is a child's response to watching a parent suffer and making a promise to himself that the same thing would never happen to him. It's one of the most quietly powerful facts about Ronaldo because it reveals something about how deeply that family history marked him and how completely he channeled that mark into discipline rather than destruction. The knock-on effects of this decision on his career are impossible to fully quantify, but they are real. The recovery advantages of not drinking alcohol, the sleep quality, the inflammation reduction, the hormonal stability, compound over a 20-year career in ways that contribute meaningfully to the physical longevity we discussed earlier. The man who never drank alcohol is also the man still playing elite football in his late 30s. These facts are related, but the origin of the decision has nothing to do with athletic strategy. It has everything to do with his father. Fact 12. He cried on live television at the Euro 2016 final, and then managed from the sideline. The 2016 European Championship final between Portugal and France in Paris is one of the most emotionally raw moments in Ronaldo's public life. In the opening minutes of the match, he was involved in a collision with Dimitri Payet and immediately signaled to the bench that something was seriously wrong. He attempted to play on twice. Both times, his knee gave way. He was eventually stretchered off, and the cameras caught something the world had very rarely seen. Cristiano Ronaldo weeping uncontrollably, inconsolable, unable to contain the devastation of what was happening. He had waited his entire career for this moment. Portugal had never won a major international tournament. This was the first major final he had reached with his national team, and it was being taken from him in the first 17 minutes by an accidental collision. But then, and this is the part the world will remember forever, Ronaldo refused to leave. He sat on the sideline for the remainder of the game with his knee in ice, giving instructions to his teammates, cajoling players who came near him, pointing and directing like a manager. When Eder scored the goal that won Portugal the tournament in extra time, Ronaldo was on his feet celebrating with more ferocity than players who'd run 90 minutes. And after the final whistle, he limped onto the pitch to lift the trophy with tears streaming down his face again. But completely different tears. Fernando Santos, Portugal's head coach, later said that Ronaldo's presence on the sideline was a tactical contribution in the truest sense. That players were responding to his instructions in real time. That the normal psychological collapse that follows the loss of a team's best player never happened because Ronaldo refused to let it happen. This is leadership in its most complete form. Not just leading by example from the front, which is easy when you're scoring goals and your body works, but leading from the margins, injured and unable to contribute physically, and still being the most important presence at the match. That night in Paris gave the world a version of Ronaldo that transcended every debate about goals and Ballon d'Ors. It gave the world a leader. Fact 13. He was a world record transfer and justified every penny. In the summer of 2009, Real Madrid paid Manchester United £80 million for Cristiano Ronaldo. At the time, this was the largest transfer fee ever paid for a football player in the history of the sport. The record had previously been held by Zinedine Zidane's move to Real Madrid in 2001 for £46 million, and Ronaldo's fee didn't just break it, it nearly doubled it. The magnitude of that fee sent a message that reverberated through football in a way that no single transfer has matched. It told the world that Real Madrid believed Ronaldo was worth a number that nobody had previously thought possible, and in doing so, it fundamentally changed the economics of the sport. The psychological ceiling on what clubs were willing to spend was shattered, and the inflation that followed transformed football finance across every level of the game. Then Ronaldo went to Real Madrid and justified every single penny by winning 4 Champions Leagues, 4 Ballon d'Ors, 2 La Liga titles, and becoming the club's all-time top scorer. He became the best player the most successful football club in history had ever had. Consider that for a moment. The club that has had Di Stefano, Puskas, Zidane, Raul, and Benzema. Ronaldo is the best of all of them. That is what he delivered for the £80 million. And when he eventually left in 2018 for Juventus, the fee was €105 million for a 33-year-old. Because even at 33, clubs were paying world-class fees to have Cristiano Ronaldo on their team. That's not just legacy. That's sustained, tangible, commercially verifiable value delivered at the highest level for 15 consecutive years. Fact 14. He robbed Coca-Cola of $4 billion in 30 seconds. Okay, this one sounds insane, but it happened, and the number is real. At the UEFA Euro 2020 press conference in June 2021, Ronaldo sat down in front of the assembled media, looked at the 2 Coca-Cola bottles that had been placed on the table in front of him as part of the tournament's official sponsorship arrangement, and moved them aside. Physically pushed them out of the camera frame. Then he held up his own water bottle and said, in Portuguese, "Água." Water. Within hours of that press conference footage going viral, Coca-Cola's share price dropped by approximately 1.6%. In raw terms, the company's market capitalization fell by approximately $4 billion because of one man pushing 2 bottles to the side of a table. Now, to be clear, the full context here matters. Share prices fluctuate for many reasons, and attributing a $4 billion drop solely to Ronaldo's gesture is an oversimplification of market mechanics. But what financial analysts and sports marketing experts agreed upon at the time was that Ronaldo's gesture contributed meaningfully to the movement and that it represented a genuinely extraordinary demonstration of individual influence over major corporate valuations. The episode became a case study in sports marketing courses and business schools almost immediately, because what it illustrated was something unprecedented: a single athlete, in a single spontaneous gesture, demonstrably affecting the stock price of one of the largest companies on earth. Nike, who holds Ronaldo's primary sponsorship, so their stock moved in the other direction that same day. He didn't plan it. He didn't strategize it. He just didn't want Coca-Cola in his shot. And the financial world noticed. Fact 15. His photographic memory for football is scientifically remarkable. Former teammates, coaches, and analysts who have worked closely with Ronaldo consistently report something that goes beyond normal footballing intelligence. Ronaldo appears to possess what amounts to a photographic memory specifically for football movement patterns, the ability to absorb, retain, and instantly recall the positioning, tendencies, and decision-making patterns of opponents, teammates, and game situations with a precision that most players simply cannot match. Coaches at Manchester United reported that Ronaldo could recall specific passages of play from matches weeks earlier in exhausting detail during video analysis sessions, not just what happened, but why it happened, what movement created the space, what the defender's body shape communicated before the ball arrived. At Real Madrid, tactical staff noted that his preparation for specific opponents was extraordinarily thorough, not just in terms of watching video but in terms of mentally rehearsing responses to specific scenarios before they occurred. There's a physical correlate to this as well. Research on Ronaldo's on-pitch movement patterns has found that he makes his final attacking run decisions significantly faster than the average elite professional, not because he processes information faster in the traditional sense, but because his memory base of football situations is so vast that he's effectively pattern matching rather than calculating. He's seen this situation 10,000 times before. He doesn't need to think. He just does. This is why Ronaldo's game has evolved so elegantly across different phases of his career. As a young player, he was the explosive one-versus-one winger. As he matured, he became the complete penalty box striker. The transition wasn't just physical training. It was cognitive. He studied, memorized, and mastered a completely different role within the game. That's not just talent. That's a mind that works differently for most people's. Fact 16. He publicly destroyed his Manchester United relationship on live television. In November 2022, Cristiano Ronaldo sat down with Piers Morgan for an interview that detonated like a bomb inside the world of football. He criticized Erik ten Hag, his then manager at Manchester United, directly and by name. He said he felt betrayed by the club's ownership, the Glazer family. He said the club had not progressed in the years since Ferguson's retirement. He said certain figures at the club had tried to force him out. He said he did not respect Ten Hag because Ten Hag did not show him respect first. The interview, broadcast in 2 parts across consecutive nights, was the most dramatic act of football self-sabotage since Paul Gascoigne's career implosions, except that Ronaldo appeared entirely calm, entirely deliberate, and entirely aware of exactly what he was doing. This was not a man losing control. This was a man making a calculated decision to end his time at Manchester United on his own terms rather than being pushed out the door. Manchester United terminated his contract by mutual consent within days. He left for Al Nassr in January 2023. The fascinating thing about this episode is the debate it generated about what it revealed. Critics said it confirmed every negative characterization of Ronaldo: the ego, the self-obsession, the inability to accept a reduced role. Supporters said it revealed a man who had been genuinely mistreated by a club failing to honor the standard he expected, and who had the courage to say so publicly when most players would have stayed silent and collected the check. Both interpretations have merit. What's undeniable is that in a world where athletes are trained from childhood to say nothing, to stay neutral, to protect the club's image at the expense of their own truth, Ronaldo said everything. And in doing so, he exercised a kind of autonomy over his own narrative that most people, athlete or not, never dare attempt. Fact 17. He deliberately gave away all 5 of his Ballon d'Or trophies. 5 Ballon d'Or awards. Most men would build a special room, would light it carefully, would bring guests to see it and stand in front of it and feel the accumulated weight of the achievement. Ronaldo did something completely different. He auctioned all 5 of them for charity. Every single one. Each Ballon d'Or was sold at auction for approximately $700,000, with all proceeds going directly to the Make-A-Wish Foundation, which grants the wishes of children with terminal illnesses. Total charitable contribution from those auctions alone approaching $3.5 million. Now let's really think about what this means. These aren't cash donations from a vast fortune. These are the physical objects that represent the 5 greatest individual achievements of his career. The things that would sit in a museum bearing his name and tell the story of his greatness to generations who hadn't been born yet. He gave them away to help sick children. The decision reveals something about how Ronaldo actually relates to his own achievements that his public persona tends to obscure. He does not need the trophies to know who he is. He knows who he is. The records are in the books. The goals are in the archives. What he chooses to do with the physical objects that represent those achievements tells you about his values. And his values said, a kid who gets to make a wish is worth more than a gold statue in a display case. Perhaps the most quietly extraordinary thing about this story is that Ronaldo has never made it central to his public image. The auctions were reported. The cause was celebrated. And then Ronaldo moved on without turning his charity into a brand story. In the social media age, where performative generosity is a currency, this restraint is genuinely remarkable. Fact 18. He moved to Saudi Arabia and became the highest-paid athlete in human history. In January 2023, after a publicly acrimonious departure from Manchester United, Cristiano Ronaldo signed for Al Nassr in Saudi Arabia's Saudi Pro League. The reported financial terms, $200 million per year. Some estimates put the total annual package, including image rights and commercial components, higher still. Either way, it is the largest salary ever paid to an athlete in the history of organized sport. The move was controversial. Purists argued that the greatest or second greatest footballer who ever lived should be competing for the highest honors at the highest level. Critics said the era was over, that the move represented an admission that the top level was no longer accessible. Ronaldo, who has spent his entire life proving critics wrong, disagreed. He arrived at Al Nassr and immediately became the dominant force in Saudi football. He broke the all-time goal-scoring record in the Saudi Pro League. He brought global attention to a competition that had previously existed entirely outside Western football consciousness. Players who would previously never have considered Saudi Arabia as a destination began to follow, partly because of the financial terms, and partly because of what Ronaldo's presence demonstrated about the league's ambition. And here's the part the critics consistently miss. At Al Nassr, playing in a league many dismiss as inferior, Ronaldo continued scoring at the kind of rate that would make him the top scorer at most European clubs. The body hasn't stopped. The goals haven't stopped. The desire hasn't stopped. He is, at the age most players have been retired for years, still doing what he does better than almost anyone else alive. $200 million a year, and arguably worth every cent of it. Fact 20. He is, statistically, the greatest goal scorer who has ever lived. And here we are. Number 20. The fact that sits above all other facts because it is the foundation everything else is built on. Cristiano Ronaldo has scored more official senior career goals than any other player in the history of football. Over 900, a number so large it stopped making sense as a goal tally sometime around the 800s. A number that requires, if you're going to really feel its weight, a simple thought experiment. If Cristiano Ronaldo had scored 1 goal per game, every single game, starting from the very first competitive football match played under recognizable modern rules, he would need to play every game from 1872 until sometime in the 1990s before he matched his own goal record. That is over 100 years of matches, 1 goal at a time, just to equal what one man has done in a career spanning roughly 25 years. And it's not just the volume, it's the context. These goals have come in Champions League finals, in World Cup matches, in El Clasico showdowns against the greatest defensive players of their era. They have come with his left foot, his right foot, his head, from 30 yards, from the penalty spot, from impossible angles. They have come in Serie A and the Premier League and La Liga and the Saudi Pro League and on the international stage in European Championships and World Cups. There is no environment in which Ronaldo has played at the top level and not dominated it. Every competition, every country, every opponent. The Messi debate is real and it is legitimate and it is one of the great ongoing conversations in the history of sport. Both men have legitimate claims to the title of the greatest footballer who ever lived. But on the specific question of who has scored the most goals, the most fundamental, undeniable unit of measurement the sport has, the record belongs to Ronaldo. No asterisk, no caveat. The most goals in the history of football. One man, from Madeira. And here is the fact above the fact, the one that ties this entire video together. When you go back through everything we've covered, the heart condition at 15, the crying for months in Lisbon, the father's alcoholism, the father's death, the tax fraud conviction, the Coca-Cola moment, the Euro 2016 sideline, the Piers Morgan interview, the Saudi chapter, the charity, the discipline, the secret is kept for 15 years, all of it, every single piece of it, was generated by a kid who decided very early that no ceiling would ever hold him. The goals are the proof, but the story behind them is the miracle. That's Cristiano Ronaldo. 20 facts, 1 life, and there has never been anything quite like it. But listen, if Ronaldo's life story has you wanting more, just imagine the insane list of things this man has done when he lost all composure. Click this video right here to see what happens when Ronaldo takes things too far.